Welcome to God with George Ortega. This is episode number 63. I'm recording it on Tuesday, January 19th, 2021 at 8:27 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is, before, about an hour ago, I was kind of like, what am I going to talk about today? And then my friend Andy, we've been friends for about 40 years, called, and basically we're preparing to do a series of episodes together. Andy happens to be um, he happens to be a rabbi within the Messianic Judaism sect of Judaism. And I'm not sure whether that's a sect of Judaism, Christianity. I think it's Judaism. But anyway, we share a lot of beliefs about God. We're gonna try to convince you that God is not just a belief or a faith, that you don't have to just rely on faith to understand God, that logically we can demonstrate that God exists. He and I, will disagree on certain, points. For example, I believe he believes in free will, and he believes Jesus is the Messiah, whereas the Messiah. I don't know what I believe about the Messiah. I don't know if the Messiah is supposed to be a person, a messianic era. Who knows? But this is this. We just talked for about an hour, and so it's going to be a special series of episodes. And if it goes well, then maybe we'll continue. We'll just like get into all these different aspects of God. The thing is, we want to keep it focused on God because, like, it's not like the series isn't about proving to you or demonstrating to you that the Exodus really happened, that the Garden of Eden really happened. Because I think he believes that. Yeah, he believes that like the world is 6,000 years old. I believe that the universe is 14 billion years old. So we have different differences. But what's good about it is like we're really good friends, and we're gonna like work around those differences to really glean out what we do agree on and what's really useful to understand uh, in order to get closer to God. So, all right, so I figured I'd start with that. And like, again, I'm not sure what else I'm going to talk about. Let's see now. I'm just waiting for God. This is like, God puts thoughts into my mind or not. And so let's see. Well, one thing yeah, I don't know. We were talking, Andy was describing like, and he, some of the stuff he knows pretty well. He was describing how, for example, the closest star to us is like, um, I don't know, 3.5 million light years away or something like that. And then, just like we were talking about the immensity of this universe, that contains 2 to 3 billion, trillion galaxies, each with 2 to 300 billion stars. And like, that is so unfathomable that we are just this teeniest little speck of reality within God's immensity. Um, but one of the things we're talking about also, for example, was, well, we're trying to understand the nature of God's omnipotence. For example, my understanding is like that God being all powerful doesn't mean that God can do anything that God wants. God cannot make 2 plus 2 equal 5. If God is eternal, as I believe he is, God cannot stop being eternal. God cannot cease to exist. So basically, like my conception of God's omnipotence is that it means that what happens, what has happened, what will happen, is all because God makes it happen, not because God can do anything. Because again, the idea, and this is well known among theologians. I think both within Judaism and Christianity. Christianity is like, and probably Islam also, that God cannot go against God's nature. So, again, if God is eternal, God is constrained to be eternal. So anyway, like we're going to explore things like that. And for example, like we were talking about how, and this is, I don't know how Andy's going to answer this, but like the idea is like, you know, um, we suffer in this world because Adam and Eve screwed up. Because like God tells Adam and Eve, listen, do not eat from the fruit of this tree. And what do? They go and eat from the fruit of the tree. But here's the thing. So like God is omnipotent and omniscient. So, you know, regarding omniscience, God knew when God created Adam and Eve that they were going to fail this test. So it kind of like seems a little unfair that, like, yeah, God apparently didn't make Adam and Eve obedient enough to pass this test. God could have made Adam and Eve a million times more obedient than apparently God made them, you know. And so, but this is so like, in other words, like it's like God was setting them up, and the other part is like, is yeah, if God is all powerful, God could have just easily made them so obedient that no manner of statement by the serpent could have induced them to disobey God. So this is and the great thing about bringing Andy into the series is like I know the basic stories, you know, but this this series, as I presented, is really a logical analysis of God and the God presented in the Bible. But like I um I can quote some scriptures, like Isaiah, I don't know, 45:7 maybe, to suggest that God may not be all good, because God says to Isaiah, I create evil, I create good, I create good, I create evil. But Andy knows a lot of scripture. So like when we're trying to demonstrate to you that the God we're proving exists is the same God described in the Bible, Andy's going to come up with, countless, uh, statements from both the Old Testament and the New Testament to affirm this, to show that right here in the Bible, it says that God knows everything, that God controls everything. So that, it should be good. We should have a great time doing this. And all right. So what else? So like we got about 20 minutes. Yeah, I didn't, I still don't know what I want to talk. What do I want to talk about? Well, I mean, I'm still, the reason I'm doing this series, I shifted from this series, the series on the coronavirus, how we're going to prevent future pandemics, to this is because I reached the conclusion, climate change, future pandemics, future Trumps, I mean, like evil, all this stuff. We have a lot of problems on Earth. And, and my considered opinion is that no, we do not have either collectively or individually the intelligence nor the morality to solve these problems as a humanity. We're failing. We're failing, and it's not funny. It really, just the way we treat the animals, on factory farms. It's beyond horrible. Um, you know, God, I don't know why God makes us do this, because again, like part of the series is to understand that we don't have a free will. God is compelling us to do this. So, but the idea is that um, in order to solve climate change, to in Judaism it's called tikkun olam, uh, repairing the world. In order to repair our world, to make it better, to keep making it better, because we've made it better and better and better. This world today is so much better than it was 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, in so many ways, for so many more of us. But to keep this trajectory going, I think we're at a phase where we can no longer rely on each other, on ourselves. We're going to have to rely on God. it's like relying on a miracle, that we don't have the attributes, the ability to do what we need to do. We're not smart enough. We're not good enough. That explains everything. You know, um, if you know if we're smart and good enough to, for example, create some kind of a pill that we take every morning, like a vitamin pill that makes us 10, 100 times more virtuous, more good, more moral, then we have a wonderful chance of continuing on this, trajectory toward a much, much better, happier world for everyone. Um, and so, like, part of, this is a great part of this show to to better understand God in order to enlist God's help in getting us out of this mess. And again, I will defend we human beings, like nobody's ever been defended. I mean, because again, like, we don't have a free will. It's not our fault. Neither that we're abusing these animals, nor that we're ignoring climate change, nor whatever. That's what it means to not have a free will, and that's a great weight that's lifted off our shoulders if we don't have to, like, have this burden of all this sinfulness. Um, but that still leaves the question is like, well, it's not up to us. Fine, we're innocent, but why does God do these things? And I was talking to Andy about this earlier, and he brought up, and so when we were talking about this, he brought up the reason we suffer is because Adam and Eve failed this test. Ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But again, like, since God knew that they were going to fail, and since God could have um, made them obedient enough so they wouldn't have failed this, I'm not sure that doesn't seem a complete answer. So, um, but that is, to me, that's the fundamental, the most important, I think, question um, that we as a human species can ask. Because, like, the most important thing to us, and this is not opinion, this is like they've asked hundreds of thousands of people in countless surveys over decades, what do you value most in life? And the number one answer is always happiness. Then they ask parents, what do you want most for your children? The number one answer is always happiness. So, so that being the case, from that perspective, since we're so hardwired to seek happiness and pleasure and avoid pain and suffering, that's how we're made. That's how God made us. It's unfathomable to me how and why God could afflict us the way we're afflicted, and how God can afflict these animals on farms, and like all these wars and stuff. It doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. But part of this series is like to keep asking these questions to which there doesn't seem to be an answer, with the hope and perhaps expectation that an answer may emerge. Perhaps not in my generation, perhaps not for 1,000 years, but yes, eventually we may know that. And even just like asking that, even more so just for today's world, asking that may be a form of prayer, like asking God, why are you doing this? In other words, like, please stop. Please stop afflicting us. Please stop afflicting. I mean, we tend to, like, you know, those of us who believe we have a free will blame us that we deserve this suffering because of our sins. Now, how do you apply this to infants? That doesn't really hold up. But even more so, I mean, like, I think people who believe in free will don't generally ascribe a free will to animals, cows, sheep, chicken, goats, And so, like, for God to afflict these animals, and you can't blame the animals. Again, it's it's a struggle, and part of the struggle is like that as we all monotheists, like to see God as all good, certainly as benevolent, but wanting our best, wanting what's best for us. Um, and well, this is like one, I'm coming to this understanding that we may have to not redefine God from being all good. Again, I tend to believe God is both good and evil, but like redefining evil. In other words, like evil, and this is not a complete answer, I guess, but evil is really, John Locke, I think, said this really well. He's a British philosopher. He said, evil is what creates, well, goodness is what creates happiness. So, like, if goodness is what creates happiness, then evil is what creates unhappiness. So, so you know, in order to understand God in a better way, we may we may want to see God as our parent. Like God is our creator, just as our parents are our creators in a certain biological sense. And like our experience here on Earth is like when we do something wrong as children. And I've said this before. I think it bears repeating a lot. Um, as children, we do something wrong, and we are punished by our parents. And punishment is really the meting out of pain, of suffering. That's what punishment is. You know, Parents inducing suffering in their children. And you might think this is so horrible, this is so unloving. But any parent will tell you, well, the reason that parents punish their children is to teach them valuable lessons that will in the future spare them much greater suffering, at the hands of God or whatever. In other words, like you teach kids to be honest, to tell the truth, because we know that people who habitually lie get themselves into trouble. We teach our children to not steal, because we know that people who steal eventually get caught. I mean, there's the price to pay for immorality. So basically, as parents, we teach our children to be moral, sometimes through punishment, so that they can live better lives. And so again, if you apply this to God, that's, I think, the way to understand our suffering. That it's not, and again, my understanding on this is evolving. It's not because of God's evil, perhaps. It's because God is sparing us greater suffering. Does does that answer everything? No, no, it doesn't, because the fundamental question continues to be, well, if you're God, for example, and you create this world with sentient beings that you make to seek pleasure and happiness and avoid pain, to not want to feel pain and suffering, um, first, why would you do that? You know, I mean, like, and some people believe that that suffering is necessary for us to feel pleasure, that unhappiness and that's, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that, or at least the way I see it, for example, one could, let's say that there's light and there's darkness, right? And one could, for example, theoretically live their entire life in light, never experiencing darkness. And that wouldn't negate the, the experience of living in the light. Or one could live their entire life um, in complete darkness and never see light. And that wouldn't negate the experience of darkness. So, in that same way, God could theoretically have created this world where not just like, and I can't speak for other life forms in on other planets and other galaxies, whatever, but assuming that that this is a kind of a, and I know I can't assume that, this is the way things work on Earth, that we beings on Earth, living beings, animals, organisms, have been designed to see pleasure and avoid pain. But there could be, and I hope there are, and there probably are, um, planets, parts of the universe where God did create these worlds completely good, blissful, where like you have a whole planet of beings, none of whom are evil, because again, evil is what creates unhappiness, and if there is no unhappiness, there can be no evil. So, and when you think about it, like this is why, like one of the things I like about this series, it just invites questions. For example, if God is infinite, as I believe God is, um, then presumably there are an infinite number of worlds that God has created that exist alongside this one. So presumably there are an infinite number of worlds where where everything's completely blissful. We apparently aren't within them, but that's and this concept of infinity again. Like if you just go um, three 2 to 3 trillion galaxies, immensities of space away from us. This place is so so large, so expansive, you know, and that's just like that's a pebble in a or a grain of sand in a beach or all this it's beyond. So what I'm saying is like we sometimes use the words, let's say eternity and infinity, with a kind of an understanding of what they mean conceptually and all, but we can actually reach this understanding of them. I this happened to me when I was like a kid, maybe like 10 years old, 15 years old, where I would just like late at night I would just start thinking of like, God being eternal or the universe being infinite. And sometimes it get really scary. It's like, holy, you know? But but yeah, this is part of what this series is about, not just to understand the nature of God as our reality, as everything, but to understand it perhaps more deeply. And again, I can't say this often enough that I really can't place my faith in people anymore. After Trump, after climate change, after what we're doing to these animals and factory farms, after this pandemic, and we're still not talking about, ending these farms, which endanger us in the future. I can no longer put my faith in people, so that's why, you know, this series is designed to inspire a greater understanding of God, to inspire a greater faith in God, praying to God, working with God instead of working with people. So that, it's basically asking God, make us do the right thing. Make us create this morality pill. Make us, address climate change. Make us stop, torturing these farm animals. Um, and Yes, I have faith that this, I, I I can't accept that our civilization is on a downward spiral, that climate change is just going to like destroy all this that we've created for for millennia. So I believe that that some spiritual miracles await us, and I think that the one that's most important is that we're much more moral, generally speaking, as people than we were, let's say, 1,000 years ago. When there was a lot of slavery throughout the world. I mean, we've ended slavery. We've ended a lot of the cruelties that we used to do to people in the past. We have, but we haven't. It's hard to in one sense, life is so much better for us as humans. We treat each other so much better now than we did in the past. So we have this trajectory that we want to continue. But the sad irony is, like, how can we be, how can we have been given so many blessings? Um, how can we be living in so much of a better world today than we did in the past, and treat these animals so horribly? It's and I should I should do episodes, because, like, to me there's four there's four major sins in the world, and this, again, this is about understanding God, but it's about understanding God so we can improve our world. Like global poverty, about 1 billion people um, whose children under 5 die at a rate of about 10 to 20,000 each day. And then there's, like, we abort as many lives every year as die of every other cause of death combined. And naturally, we're ignoring climate change. And the fourth one is I'm running out of time. That's, I got to end the show. All right, so, like, watch this every Monday through Friday, channel 76. If you get Optimum 45, you get Verizon on White Plains Community Media. The episodes are on YouTube. What's the fourth one? There's global poverty, climate change, abortion. Oh, the animals, the animal abuse. We need to stop abusing these animals. If you believe that God rewards us for doing good and punishes us when we don't, then the world, climate change, these pandemics, it's much easier to understand. So, all right. So I'll see you next time. Thanks.